Welcome back to Mondays with Mom, the podcast where my mom, Leah,
Hi.
and I, Jo, dive into her stories, experiences, and the lessons she's hoping I finally take to heart. My mom has always dreamed of turning her life into a book or a movie, and this podcast is our way of making that dream come true, one episode at a time. Right, Mom?
Right, Joey, and thanks for that.
So what's on the agenda this week?
Well, to start off on a slightly more serious note, I think with everything happening in the Middle East right now, my thoughts and prayers are with everybody that's living there or anyone that's stranded there and everyone that's got loved ones there.
Same.
I can't even begin to conceive how absolutely terrifying it must be to be constantly living with fear of bombs exploding and missiles and ballistic weapons, and my thoughts and prayers go out to everybody there.
Yeah, mine too.
What I was thinking about, and it makes me smile because we need some things to smile about these days, is that South Africa is geographically the best place to be when all of this is happening.
Outside of Antarctica.
That too. But I'm just thinking, that South Africa is geographically so far removed from all of it.
Yeah.
But, okay, guys, just so that you don't all feel bad, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's safe there. It's safe in terms of wars, but not safe in terms of crime.
It's also pretty safe from natural disasters. Like, South Africa is a pretty cool place.
It's a very cool place, I must admit. And yes, it doesn't, although I think it does have some fault lines, they don't seem to react the same way they do elsewhere in the world. So, earthquakes in South Africa they're not very common. And when they are caused, they tend to be caused more by mining than by South Africa's problem and good points are its humans.
So it's all man-made, our issue.
Yes. I think that's what makes South Africa the best. And that's what sometimes makes South Africa the worst.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough.
But it got me thinking about a time in South Africa when it actually got dangerously close to all-out civil war. And this was in the early 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that the early 1990s were probably the peak of political turmoil in South Africa. So the ANC, which was for anyone that's out there that's not aware, yes, which stands for African National Congress, was a political party that Nelson Mandela was president of.
Okay.
And before the early 1990s, it was banned. The political party was banned. I think it was labeled as a terrorist organization.
Okay.
And it wasn't allowed to legally exist. Yeah, that was very hectic. So this was the beginning of what finally led to Nelson Mandela becoming the first democratic president of South Africa. So in around 1989, a guy called F.W. de Klerk, right, became president of the National Party, which was the ruling party in South Africa.
At the time, yeah.
At the time. And he succeeded P.W. Botha. And what he did is he was the guy that unbanned the ANC, and then he began talks to get to a democratic South Africa.
Okay.
Now, in the early 1990s then, there were a lot of political stakeholders and a lot of people wanting to get in and who was going to rule and what was going to happen. And there was another big party called the Inkatha Freedom Party, which was kind of known as the party of the Zulu people.
Okay.
It began, I think, years before as just the Inkatha Party, so it wasn't like the ANC in terms of the ANC was very, very involved in what they called the armed struggle. So the Inkatha wasn't banned because they were initially more a cultural struggle against apartheid.
Okay, interesting.
Yes, but when now talks were beginning about democracy, they began a lot of infighting in South Africa, and there was fighting between the Inkatha Freedom Party supporters and the ANC supporters and all the other ANC allies. And that led to major turmoil, which kind of in round about 1992 peaked.
Okay.
Now, for me, 1992 was like this huge year Because, firstly, it's the first year I worked as a physiotherapist.
Okay.
And secondly, it's the first time I ever was eligible to vote in South Africa.
Eligible.
Eligible.
Nice word.
So previously, I wasn't old enough.
Okay.
And so the first time I voted was quite funny because it wasn't even a proper general election.
All right.
The first time I got to vote, it was a referendum. Now, for my Greek people out there, δημοψήφισμα.
Okay, so that's the first ever time you got to vote.
That is the very first time I voted. And the first time I voted, you had to answer yes or no. You didn't get to put your X on who you want to lead. It was yes or no. And the question that should have been asked, which would have been a simple question, is do you want to end apartheid?
Okay, but so that wasn't the question.
That wasn't the question. The question was, do you support the continuation of the reform process that President de Klerk began on the 2nd of February 1990 and which is aimed at a new constitution through negotiations?
Those are a lot of words for one simple question.
I mean, that is quite a question. You practically need a degree to understand the question. And then the answer was yes or no.
Okay.
It sounds like that question needs like a bit of a discussion. Anyway, the thing was, it was a vote at the time for white people only.
Okay.
And it actually, I think, was one of the highest voter turnouts of all time.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so it had an 86% turnout.
Mm-hmm.
And from just reading up a little bit, because I couldn't remember the exact figures, but more or less 68% of people voted yes, let's carry on the negotiations, and the remaining minority voted no.
Yeah.
So I actually felt very proud. I felt like I was part of history.
Well, you were.
That first vote of mine.
Like a small part of history, yeah.
Yes. Now, I qualified as a physiotherapist the year before that.
Okay.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Joey. This referendum was held in March of 1992. And I qualified as a physio round about the end of November 1991.
Yeah, okay.
And I remember my parents had come up to me and said, listen, I was 21 at the time, which was a nice age to finish studying. And my parents had come up to me at the time and...
supposed to be a comment to me.
No. I hadn't done a master's. My degree involved an honors, but not a master. It's different these days. No. Don't take any of that personally. And they said to me, you've got two options. We can either celebrate your 21st birthday with this massive party like we had for your sister, or else you can actually take a trip to Greece for 3 months and stay with your grandparents. And I thought, okay, so the grandmother that loves me and the grandfather that worships the ground I walk on, and I could go to Greece for 3 months, or I can have a one-night party. I mean, okay, let's stop and think for a bit.
Yeah, like the choices aren't equal.
Like you would even need to think about that. So needless to say, I picked the going to Greece. And my dad just said to me, listen, there's only one condition to this.
Okay, what was the condition?
And I didn't mention as well just before the decision that it was all expenses paid.
Okay, so again, the choice is like it wasn't an equal choice.
It wasn't an equal choice. But the condition was that upon my return, I needed to have a job secured already.
In today's day and age, that probably would never happen.
Yes. Well, listen, there was no LinkedIn in those days, so that would have made it a lot harder. And I mean, I basically at the time thought, yeah. Yes, of course I'll get a job. But all I was thinking about is what I'm going to put in my suitcase. What can I pack? What outfits do I need? And I thought, yeah, I'll worry about the job later on. So I arrived in Greece. I was 21 and single with two people who absolutely adored me and would do anything for me and were spoiling me like crazy. And it was the best 3 months of my life ever.
Oh, you must have been living the dream.
I was living the dream. I probably got about 12 podcast episodes just on those 3 months. It was really, I had the most fun ever. And I arrived back in South Africa, and it must have been near the end of February.
Okay.
And I had even thought of a few things that I bought in Greece because I knew that I wanted to work in a hospital in the beginning.
Uh-huh.
So I didn't want to go directly from university into private practice.
Yeah.
And I knew, as everybody knows who's listened to the previous episodes, that physiotherapists wear navy blue and white. So I had even planned, I'd even bought one or two things on my holiday in Greece so I can wear for work. But what I hadn't planned is where I was going to work.
Yeah.
So that was
the actual like core part
the actual core part of it. And the thing about that is that even today, I know it gets much worse today, but even in those days, when you wanted to apply to a hospital, you would have needed to apply the year before. So I would have needed to apply as soon as I qualified, send through my application, and then in roundabout December, they get them.
Did it really take a full year for them to get their applications?
No, from November that you finished your degree, you start applying in that December, and in January you can start working.
Oh, okay, I get it.
So, but you can't kind of appear because they have a certain number of posts.
Yeah.
So you can't just appear near the end of February and say, oh, hello, here I am, because they've already filled those posts for the year.
Yeah, okay.
You would have to practically wait a year. And I mean, I wouldn't have minded waiting a year. I thought, okay, like gap couple of months, but my dad was not having it and he was getting more and more annoyed. And I thought, I'm going to have to make a plan now. And he kind of said to me, you promised that you would have a job. And I said, yeah, I've got a job. And I was like thinking, what job? Where can I apply? And then I remembered about a hospital I ended up working at in my final year of study. And I ended up working there by like this strange twist of fate that led me to this hospital by no means of my own, led me to this hospital where I ended up doing this very small rotation of 3 weeks.
I didn't even know that you could get physios in hospitals, to be fair.
Oh, physios definitely work in hospitals. Physios work in ICUs, they work in orthopedic sections, there's outpatients, they work, as I did, with stroke patients, with paraplegic patients, in anything you can think of. So physios are quite big in hospitals. It's not just private practice.
Okay.
I think private practice is the way of thinking about it, when you're planning the outfits.
Yeah.
So I worked in this hospital that I'd never heard of in my life for 3 weeks. And it was the kind of hospital that I would have never thought to go there. I would have never dreamed of working there. But I remember that my 3 weeks there had gone really, really well.
Okay, that's good.
And yes, and the head of department there, the head of the physiotherapy department had kind of said to me, you're such a nice person and you work so well. When you're qualified, if you ever need a job, you can just come over here and I'll get you a job. And I thought,
nice.
I thought I'm holding her to that.
Yeah.
So I appeared the one day, kind of at the end of February, and said, hello, I'm here for a job. And I was expecting her to burst out laughing and say, listen, like, what are you talking about? And she said, sure, when can you start? And I said, okay, I can start from tomorrow. And she said, okay, be here at 8.
Wow.
So that's how I got my first job. Not exactly the same like stress that you guys have these days and 27 interviews and,
Yeah, you're going to like a boot camp or something.
Yes. And I don't think there was a lot of competition for that job because this particular hospital, which was called Natalspruit Hospital, was not in a really great area.
Okay, so it was like a rural area.
It wasn't a rural area. It was a hospital that served 3 East Rand townships. And basically, for anyone that hasn't heard of the term before, townships were these urban settlement areas that had been set up by the
apartheid government.
And what they did, they were basically to keep Black people, these particular townships, to keep them away from where white people were living.
Yeah.
And the townships were not very well planned. They weren't subject to good town planning and that kind of thing. So they were a bit all over the place. They didn't have very good infrastructure. So no great roads and sewerage and electricity. Those things weren't set up properly as they should be. And a lot of people that lived in the townships were actually quite poor.
Yeah.
And the 3 townships that this hospital serviced were Vosloorus, Thokoza, and Katlehong.
Okay. So you're actually were working at a hospital that serviced the area that Mickey was from.
That's exactly it. So Mickey,
didn't know that.
yes, Mickey was rescued from Katlehong,
yeah.
and basically of the areas in Johannesburg, these 3 townships border Benoni, Boksburg, and Alberton. So that's
Okay.
why Mickey ended up at the Boksburg SPCA.
It all makes sense now.
Right. Now, the thing about these 3 townships were that Katlehong was mainly an ANC stronghold area, and Thokoza was mainly an IFP, which was the Inkatha Freedom Party stronghold.
Okay.
And Vosloorus was something between the two. But during 1992, it all happened with this whole referendum and everyone agreeing to go ahead with the democratic elections. Major fighting began in these townships.
Hectic, yeah.
So it was ANC people killing Inkatha Freedom Party people and vice versa. And the thing about it was, a lot of the times that people were now being split according to which language they spoke, which also wasn't very valid. They had kind of decided that, oh, if you speak Zulu, you're probably an Inkatha Freedom Party supporter, and if you speak Xhosa, you're an ANC supporter, and people were actually attacking each other and killing each other based on their backgrounds, based on beliefs, without really having issues with each other otherwise.
Yeah.
It was more to get a kind of decide that which political party out of the ones that had never had an opportunity to vote would now dominate in South Africa.
Yeah, okay.
And it led to a lot of political unrest. In fact, people were very, very concerned that South Africa would end up in a full-on civil war because of this.
Yeah, we almost did.
We did almost, and I was in the thick of it. So not only was it because the people that were being injured in these areas, because a lot of people were being killed, a lot of people were being shot and stabbed and attacked in horrendous ways, and they were coming to the hospital for treatment. Also, we had criminals and people that were attacking people coming to the hospital to hide.
That's really hectic.
And then
scary.
Very hectic, very scary. And the other thing is you could constantly hear gunfire and explosions, and it was really, really scary.
I can just imagine.
It had gotten to the point where people that were working in the hospital were told that they couldn't walk a certain path to work, otherwise they would get killed. And for me, being a white person driving into those areas at the time, it was extremely scary. And our ways of figuring it out was we would learn as physios, not only know when to kind of try and take cover, but at the same time, we would learn what the different weapons sounded like so that we could know who was firing them and should we worry or shouldn't we worry.
Wow.
So it was completely hectic. I mean, I look back on it and think, really? Did I live through that? Do you know what I'm saying? It's still nothing compared to what people are living through these days.
Of course.
But still, it was quite hectic. And I remember the fighting that was going on in the townships. When it was township fighting, we would recognize the sounds, which were basically weapons that had been supplied by the Soviets. So it was mainly AK-47s, or for Greek people, Kalashnikovs. And when it came to the police and the armies that were firing, they would tend to be using like Dufekia and R1 rifles and R4 rifles.
Wow, okay.
So we would get to recognize the sounds. And I remember on a few occasions, which was quite like shocking, they would stop my car. There would be roadblocks, and police and army would stop my car and they would say, duck. And I think, what do you mean, duck?
Me?
I think duck, like what? Get lower down in my car? Like, how is that going to help anyone? And you would duck and they would be firing missiles.
Wow.
You could hear, and you'd hear the explosion flying over your car. It was terrifying. And then after a while, things would go quiet.
That's crazy.
And they would open up the blockade and say, okay, you can go to work now. And I think, I don't know if I want to go to work right now.
Yeah, wow. Okay.
So it was really, really scary, I must admit. I mean, believe it or not, we even had an occasion where Winnie Mandela, who was the former wife of Nelson Mandela, had arrived at the hospital and had caused this whole uproar, and somebody was necklaced on hospital property.
That's very crazy.
Now, for the people that don't know what necklacing is, it's this horrific method of killing someone that was more or less, if I can say, invented or more or less made popular around about this time of civil unrest in South Africa, where the person or the victim has a tire or tires put around them that are filled with petrol and then set alight. And the person can't get away and burns alive that way.
Wow.
So it's quite horrifying. And this had happened on hospital property.
That's insane.
It was completely insane. It was completely insane. I would go home and try and not tell my parents any of the stories, because then I knew I would be out of a job for sure. They would like keep me back. But they knew that that some things were happening. They just didn't know the full extent of them.
Yeah.
And then on one occasion, which I'll never forget as long as I live, we had been told in the hospital that they were expecting trouble. And so they said that, listen, we want all white people that are at the hospital to actually leave early today.
Okay.
If there's any hope for you guys, just you go and do what you need to do and be out by 12.
All right.
And so the head of the physiotherapy department had told us all that, listen, what I suggest you guys do is spend the morning seeing only essential patients. And she kind of qualified that for us and said, essential patients are people that if you don't see them today, they will be dead by tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
Everyone else, leave them. You actually don't need to spend any time on them. So I had gone around and seen everyone that I thought was essential, which was basically people that were in ICU and stuff like that. And
yeah, critical condition patients, basically.
Exactly. And everyone else I had left out. And at the time, I was in charge of the pediatric wards. And there was a child in there that had really affected me in previous days. It was a very, very sad story that a little 4-year-old boy that the mother had brought in because he was feeling unwell, and it was discovered that he had malaria. And unfortunately, as sometimes happens with malaria, the malaria crossed his blood-brain barrier, and the parasites blocked small blood vessels going to his brain, and he got cerebral malaria.
Shame, man.
And that's very difficult to come back from. And what this child was doing is, on a daily basis, was worsening. And eventually, what happens with this is that people that have it, there is a chance of recovery if you get the correct treatment via a drip intravenously, and you do that quickly. There are patients that do recover, but it's not the best thing to have cerebral malaria. It's quite a dangerous condition that frequently leads into a coma, and then you die, or may leave you with neurological symptoms. Anyway, and this little child every day was getting a little bit worse. And I didn't want to see this child. I didn't want to see it. I told myself that I don't need to see this child today because it'll still be alive tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
And it doesn't need physio to help it survive. So the time must have been 11:40, 20 to 12, and I knew I had to be out by 12. And I thought, well, I'm going. I'm allowed to go. I've done my patients. So I get into my car, and something says to me, like a voice, like a feeling says, you haven't seen that little boy. And I answered the feeling. I said, well, I don't want to see that little boy today. He upsets me enough when I see him on other days. I'm not going.
Uh-huh.
And so I get into my car, and where my car was in the physiotherapy department was a little bit of a distance from the front gate of the hospital. And I drove the whole way to the front gate of the hospital with this nagging feeling saying, go and see this child, and me fighting the feeling saying, I refuse. And I drove out of the hospital, and I'd even gotten a kilometer down the road, and I actually thought, I'm either going to, I don't know, stab myself, or I better go back and see this child, because I wasn't going to be able to relax.
Uh-huh.
There was absolutely no way. And I looked at the time, and it was 10 to 12. And I thought,
Uh-uh.
I've got 10 minutes. And I drove back there really quickly with people looking at me thinking, what are you doing? And I just said to everyone, I've forgotten something very important. And ran back in there. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go see this child. I didn't know why I needed to see this child, but I went to go see this child. Something in me said, I have to go see this child. And I ran to the pediatric ward. And as I walked in and looked at this child's bed, he was choking.
Sure.
Someone had put food in his mouth and not realizing that he was in such a bad condition. And they had left him there, and this child was actually choking. And I started screaming, and then the nurses came and they revived him.
Sure. Wow.
And I kept thinking afterwards, well, what if I hadn't listened to that feeling?
Yeah, what if you just left that feeling alone?
But then I realized probably God gave the feeling to me and another 700 people, and then decided that, well, one of them's actually going to listen.
Thank goodness you did.
So that was very profound for me.
Yeah, wow.
And anyway, I carried on working at that hospital. I have a few more stories to share about that kind of thing and what was happening in there. But I must admit, it was quite life-changing for me. I think it shaped who I am and made me see things a little bit differently and not to actually take life or people around me for granted.
Yeah, wow.
So that's a bit of a heavy story for today.
Yeah, but it's good. It's good to share some of those stories as well.
It is definitely good to share the stories.
So what are the lessons that we can take away from the story, Mom?
Okay, well, I think the main lesson is that life is precious.
Agreed.
It's good to be a part of history.
Living through historical moments is not necessarily fun at the time, but you just got to survive through them as best you can.
Yes. And also, I wanted to say that little voice inside of you, there's a purpose for it. So sometimes listen to it.
Okay, I think that's a good lesson.
Definitely.
And what are we grateful for?
Okay, well, we're always grateful for the podcast.
Absolutely.
I'm grateful that I survived all of that to tell the stories.
Me too.
I'm grateful that I managed to save that little child's life.
Yes, that's a big one. I'm grateful that you got a job so quickly.
I am grateful that I got a job so quickly and that I got to wear those blue and white outfits.
Yeah, you got to put that color theory to good use.
I did put the color theory to good use.
And also, I'm grateful that you survived the turmoil and that you live to tell all these stories today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also grateful that my one little vote there counted for something really important.
It's good that you are part of history. I'm grateful for that too.
Absolutely.
And so that was okay, a bit different to our usual episodes, much funnier and more lighthearted. But it was really important to tell that story, I think.
I think it is one of the stories that's in my head all the time, and definitely.
And so I'm grateful that you got to tell it. And on that note, I think we're going to end it over here.
Thanks for listening, guys.
And make sure to subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform that you're listening to it on, because we really appreciate it and it helps us out a lot.
We do.
And we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.